I'm going to be an actuary. I remember pausing it. I'm like, did you just say actuary? Did you?
What is an actuary? And an actuary's response is, well, how many marks is that question for? But what an actuary is trying to do is organize and order the chaos of the future.
Sure.
And that's where it gets a little bit like, what? Like what's going on here?
Hi, Michael.
Hey, pleasure to meet you.
It's nice to meet you too. I've been following you on YouTube for not the longest time, although it should have been longer because, we went to the same school. You started recording your videos when I was still, I think in 2015. Where was I at that time? Is that when you started?
So I actually started 2013, but I mean, when I say 2013, I think I posted 1 or 2 videos on like the insurance cycle, left it for the longest of time. And then it was only really, in 2015 that I started posting quite a lot, and actually getting into the swing of things.
Yeah. So I started following you this year, and the work that you've been doing is really amazing. All the information that you've been distributing on what being an actuary means and the different areas in which actuaries work, giving tips on how to study, your courses that you've been doing, your professional development, going from being a student to a fellow. It's a lot to take in, but it's also very inspiring at the moment. So could you tell us a bit more about yourself?
Oh, okay, sure thing. And I must say it was quite a fun time to update the YouTube channel from student to fellow. I was a little bit nervous because when you go under the name of, student actuary, you've got a little bit of a license to make mistake. You can be a little bit more casual, a little bit more chilled. But as soon as you hit, change it to fellow, it's kind of like, you're representing the actuarial profession here. You've got to rewatch these videos and make sure everything you're saying is factual and correct. But a little bit about my journey. So it's interesting. I was I'm a December baby. So my mom loves to tell the story about how, they wanted to get me tested. Like, was I allowed to go in with all the other kids at the 91 cohort?
Yeah.
And apparently the psychologist who assessed me, they were like, listen here, this kid is, he's at a few ages above what he should be at. So he'll be more than capable at 91. But my mom never told me this. She never really told me this because elementary school, primary school, I got the good achiever, but I was never top of the class. It was only when we went into high school where they started posting a scoreboard of your marks.
Yeah.
And it almost, I'm a very competitive person, and it was frustrating because the school I was at, I was horrible at sport and everybody else was good at sport. And also being a December baby, I was a little bit, physically weaker than all the other kids in my class. So it was really, really frustrating that I couldn't compete well at sport. But now with academics, there was this leaderboard. And so I was studying at school, not because, I had to do it, but it was more like, this is a competition. I want to be number one. Like I wanted to learn, I wanted to go down. I wanted to, like sometimes I would even take a day off school because I could learn quicker than, like, if I wanted to catch up or go ahead of the class. I could take a day off school, especially, when we had like a fair or like one of those less academic days. And it worked really well. I mean, it got so competitive that in my matric year, the goal was to try to get top mark in every single class, or every single subject, which I almost did. I missed out on Afrikaans, didn't even get a distinction for Afrikaans, and English, I didn't get the award for English. Languages just, I really struggle with them, but managed to do well enough in all the other subjects that I got into the IEB top 50, so top 50 in the country for matric, which was, it's really, really exciting. And that's why I'd always wanted to do business, entrepreneurship. I was interested in finance, but you can imagine now that I've got all of these good marks, or this really great maths mark, I had all of my parents' friends telling me, you have to study actuarial science. If you're smart, you have to study actuarial science.
Underline have to.
Yes, have to. And I didn't know what it was. I
Yeah.
didn't know, because what does the word actuarial mean? Like it's, some
Mm.
weird Roman word that means secretary. But, young me had no understanding of Latin or anything like that. So
Mm.
it sounded cool, like actuarial science. Like there's a little bit of like a mystery behind it. Um, like I remember I thought I was going to have to do physics and chemistry because, of the word science in it.
Yeah.
And everyone was like, no, you did good at school. You have to do actuarial science. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. But I remember like, because you can imagine coming top 50 in the country, it puffs you up. It makes you a little bit
Yeah.
arrogant. You kind of walk around like, oh, look at me. I'm the smartest kid in the
I
world.
own the world.
Yeah, I like this is, university, bring it on. And I
Yeah.
remember sitting next to this kid and, I was like, I'm IB top 50. And he like looks at me and he's like, check this video out. And he slides me this video and it's him on Channel E News talking with the anchor and the tick at the bottom. This is the #1 student in South Africa. And that's when I realized, oh my gosh, I've entered like another league here. And I went from being top of the class, acing everything, to being that kid who just passed. When like the pass marks came out, instead of being like, oh, did I come first, second, or third? It was, did I get more than 50? Did I get more than 50? And sometimes like I'd get 59% and just miss the exemption. And
Yeah.
I'd be sad but happy that I passed. Like, yeah, I passed. And it's like I missed the exemption. It's like, it's fine. At least I'm still in this course. So
Yeah.
it was a complete turnaround. And you can imagine, like, I see myself as being competitive. Like I like fighting. But when at WITS, they didn't really have too much of a ranking system. And it was more, you had to be really, really intelligent to do actuarial science. So I did struggle a bit. Like I was pushing, I think some days I even clocked in 10 hours a day of studying. So that's not just,
Wow.
10, like that's excluding the breaks and stuff. And look, after
Yeah.
a day like that's quite silly because then you really, really broken the days afterwards. But yeah, I had to push very, very hard to I remember I just scraped passes. And then right at the end, I got enough exemptions just to get into the honors year. And I remember the lecturer was quite confused because I had missed a lot of the earlier exemptions, but somehow managed to get all the later ones right at the end to just get in. And he said, listen here, normally, because when you're in your honors year, you then tutor the bottom year classes.
Mm.
He says, normally you tutor the subject that you got your exemption at. He's like, but I don't feel confident letting you tutor the third years. So we're rather going to just put you and tutor the first years. Like, I know you didn't get that exemption, but,
Would rather
let's rather
put you
put
there.
the first years and not with the third years.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so it was, but then it turned around quite nicely in the sense that in the honors year, that's when you do CA1 or what's it called now, A311. I don't know what the new name is with the UK code, that actuarial risk management.
CP1.
Is that what it's called? Yeah.
Yeah. That's the one I'm actually writing currently, but
Oh.
story for another day.
So it's funny, that one, I mean, it's an insane exam. It's probably the hardest of all the exams, but it's not as mathematical as the other ones.
Mm-hmm.
And for some reason, things started coming back to me, and there was a financial component of it, which I dominated. Like, it's weird. Finance, I really, really, it just connects with me. And so I did the financial specialist subject, which aced that nice and easy. Try to do the general one, the general specialist subject. It cut me down by the knees. It was so fascinating to see myself be really, really good at one section and then really, really bad at another. And it kind of shows why a company needs a group of actuaries, because it's unlikely that any individual is going to excel across all the various fields. So I actually couldn't pass the general insurance specialist subject. So I had to do the enterprise risk management one, which was F106 or SP9, or I'm not sure what its code is now. And fortunately, that one had quite a bit of overlap with finance, and it was one that I actually just connected with. So those were my two specialists. And then there was the fellowship exam, which, long story short, I walked into that exam thinking, flip, I know finance, how hard can this be? Answered all the questions, thought I'd aced it, got my mark back, and it was like an F, what was it? And it was an FC. They grade you on how badly you failed the fellowship. Wrote it again the following year, got an FB. And I was devastated. I mean, never had I failed an exam, and now I have failed it twice. But fortunately, the Actuarial Society had like a workshop group that you could go to for a couple of weeks. The instructor gave us mountains and mountains of work to read and articles to go through, all the way back from like 1997, you know, like the formation of the and it was insane. Like this one guy did an entire report to the UK government on pension funds, and it was just insane. But after going through all that work, after taking significant time off work and dedicating myself to this thing, I managed to get it on the third attempt. And I'm actually very grateful because, yeah, it's kind of like there's finance and then there's, you know, finance at this other level. And I'm really great, yeah, that I didn't pass it straight away, because then I would have been walking around thinking I know everything about finance. And finance is one of those games where arrogance can be very, very expensive, because then you double down on a bet and then you've actually miscalculated something, or you've looked over something else, and then, you know, it can smack you and you can lose a lot of money. So yeah, it's weird. The actuarial journey has taught me to be a lot more humble. And I think, yeah, I'm a lot more humble than I was when I finished school, where I was like an arrogant little guy thinking I was the smartest. Now I realize, no, I actually have to work hard if I want to, yeah. And that there's so many more people that are smarter, and that you actually have to make sure you check a whole bunch of things before you make a big decision. So yeah, that's kind of like my little life story, I guess, in a nutshell. Yeah.
And I can really identify with most of the stuff that you explained in your life story. I remember also coming from high school thinking, oh, I am the bee's knees. And then I get to uni and there are people with 100% in maths, English, and what was the other subject? Physical science. And then I'm just like, but why didn't anyone tell me that you could actually get to 100%? I thought you just had to get to the 90s, because 100 is virtually unobtainable. But yeah, it was a learning curve.
No, look, it's such a way to, like, pop your ego, is when you think you're so smart with, like, because I was also like 90s in the maths, and then you come across these guys who've got 100%, and then you're like, you're flawless. That's impossible. That's
Okay. So thank you so much for that intro, Michael. So I think now we can go into talking about the actuarial profession. So I'm just going to give a bit of background on that. So from where I'm sitting, it's not the most out there kind of profession. It's sort of in the shadows, like you mentioned earlier, and not everyone talks about it in like everyday conversations. So it's easy for someone in their mind's eye to picture what a doctor does, what a lawyer does, what an accountant does. But the moment you say actuary, they're like, you're good in math. And that's literally all they have to offer. Or they hit you with the, what is that? I've never heard of it. And it's not anyone's fault per se. It's just the way the world has taken a view on this profession. It's just the technical guys who just sit around in a corner, not to be known. So the funny thing is, when I was watching Zootopia, there's a line where the little jaguar goes, I'm tired of being a lonely hunter. I'm going to hunt for tax exemptions. I'm going to be an actuary. I remember pausing it. I'm like, did you just say actuary? Did you? And, you know, I had no one to understand me in that context, that it's such a big deal that my profession got mentioned on TV in a movie that's going to be shown to kids. So I think it's really important that we, as the actuarial professionals, market our profession and let it be known out there. So that's why I asked you to come and speak to the Actuarial Society of Zimbabwe and our general audience about what it is that an actuary is. So what's your definition of an actuary?
So what I'm going to do is take a step back, because I mean, well, normally we have a classic joke, and it's like, you know, what is an actuary? And an actuary's response is, well, how many marks is that question for? You know, is it a 1 mark question? Is it a 10 mark? Because that's gonna thing. And I think we've got time. So if I was to go for maybe a slightly longer answer, I would take a step back and just first bring up mythology. The reason why I bring up mythology is because one of the guys that I've been looking at to help me teach actuarial science better has been a guy called Carl Jung. And he was a big fan of mythology, and he tried to, you know, distill what are like the archetypes of mythology. And his reasoning was that mythology is powerful because, think about it, we still know a lot of the stories that were told 3,000-4,000 years ago. Like, we still are aware of some of these crazy stories, you know, and they're very vivid and they're crazy and all that kind of stuff. But there's a reason why we've remembered them, because they follow a certain structure. And Carl Jung essentially breaks it down into two. Now I'm oversimplifying this guy's work, but he basically breaks it down that you've got two types of people, or two types of characters. The one is an agent of chaos, and the other is an agent of order. So your agent of chaos is somebody who's unhappy with the established order, and they come in and they disrupt and they bring in chaos. And this is someone that you can think of as an entrepreneur in today's time. Of course, also maybe a terrorist. You know, it's normally sometimes filled by the villain role, someone who's coming in, mixing things up. But yeah, your entrepreneurs, your artists, your terrorists, kind of fall under that category. And then you have another group of people known as the agents of order, and they see chaos. They see chaos, and they come in and they try and establish order. And these are your people like your doctors. You know, chaos to them is illness. They come in with their medicine and they bring order, which is a healthy body. Lawyers, they see injustice as chaos. They come in with, you know, the law and the court proceedings. That's their method, and they establish, you know, a thing that is fair. You know, that's what the lawyer does. An accountant as well is kind of like the chaos of a company's books. They put it nicely in those journal entries. And what an actuary also falls under, and I guess this is why it's also a bit of a profession, is an actuary is trying to calm the chaos, but not necessarily of the present, like what your doctor, your lawyer, and your accountant is doing. Or sometimes those ones are even a little bit in the past, like with the lawyer and the accountant. But what an actuary is trying to do is organize and order the chaos of the future. And that's where it gets a little bit like, what? You know, like what's going on here? Because what actuaries do is we say, listen here, we believe that the world is uncertain, that the future, we believe that there are multiple possible realities that can occur, which is very different to some scientists who've got a very deterministic viewpoint. They say, if you know everything now, you can predict with certainty what's going to happen. Actuaries are like, yeah, maybe that's the case if you have all that knowledge, but at our stage where we don't have all knowledge, the future acts very much like an uncertain thing. And I mean, just to give some examples where actuaries like to play is, you don't know when you're going to die, but when you die, that event is going to cause a lot of chaos, especially if you've got dependents, especially if you've taken a loan from a bank. You can imagine death. Yes, it's horrible. There's grief and all that kind of things, but it's also a chaotic event because suddenly you've pulled somebody out of the system of order. So things get a little bit crazy. So what an actuary can do is they can say, okay, what we can maybe do now is we can say, how much money do you need so that when you die, that chaos is subsided a little bit? So let's say you die, maybe you need 10 million Rand to meet the bond repayment that you have on your house so that your family isn't kicked out into the streets. And then what they'll say is, if, of course, that 10 million doesn't just pop out of nowhere. If you set aside, 200 Rand a month over a given period, then that should be, that is expected to cover that amount. And then what actuaries do is they've noticed that uncertainty or chaos can reduce when you group it together. So it's one of these crazy things where by combining chaos, you can see a pattern in it. And that's why actuaries love their data. Because if you, but like, let's say, you don't know when one person is going to die. Like you really just, you don't know when one person is going to die. But if you have 1,000 people, you know that, okay, of this group, five or six are going to die, in 2 years' time, or, 10 are going to be dead by the 5th year. You can start becoming more certain or have more confidence in your statements there. And that allows an actuary to then calculate the reserves that an insurance company needs to hold in order to make those repayments. So an actuary is doing quite a few things. They're trying to assess how much money is needed to end the chaos, how much do you need to start setting aside now? The pricing, so it's like the benefit design, the premium that needs to be paid, as well as the reserves that need to be held. So there's quite a lot of things that an actuary can do. And that's why, like I said, it's always a difficult thing to just say in a one-word answer, or,
True.
you know, it's not like, oh, I'm a doctor, I heal people. It's more like, well, think about a doctor, they're also diagnosing, they then have to do this, they can specialize. But same with an actuary, there's all these kind of different little components that they can do. And then you have your traditional actuary who focuses on life insurance. But then people realize that, hey, you know, chaos also occurs when you crash your car, or chaos also occurs when your business is robbed, or when there's a fire at your house. So all of these chaotic events, which we refer to as risks, are things that actuaries can go in and start saying, hey, let's start doing the same procedure that we did for life insurance with these things as well. And what we're seeing is that we're extending that even further. So actuaries are going into what we call the wider fields. And this is where enterprise risk management comes in, because it's banking. Banking, you know, you make loans to a whole bunch of people. And if they default, that's a chaotic event. And, you know, an actuary, again, can maybe provide insurance for that occurring, you know, for that not happening. Or, and I think this is very, very new, but I think actuaries are going to be seeing their role in this space gradually grow, is operational risk. You know, what happens if you've got a team of employees and the one opens up a, you know, computer virus, or they send sensitive data to the wrong client, or, you know, something chaotic happens, your actuary can then come in and say, okay, maybe we can use the principles that we've been designing in other areas to this as well, and try and, you know, so that a company, so for instance, this whole COVID pandemic thing, if every company in the world had an actuary, okay, maybe I'm being a little bit too optimistic or naive here, but let's say every company in the world had an actuary, and that actuary was, you know, very much aware of risk, spent his whole day, his or her days, you know, identifying risk, measuring and managing it and monitoring it. Then they would have said, you know what? There have been pandemics in the past. You know, we had the swine flu, we've had the bubonic plague, you know, we've had the Spanish flu. You know, this wasn't like a new thing. It wasn't like, ooh, a virus. We've never seen that before. And there's been movies, you know, where crazy things have happened. So an actuary would have said, especially for an airline, like the airline industry, because what the airline industry did is they didn't keep any cash reserves. They purposely took their cash reserves and gave it back to shareholders, because the more cash you have, you're diluting potential returns, and your shareholders aren't happy because they don't have the money, it's in the business. So all these airlines, specifically in America, gave their cash back to the shareholders, because from 2010 to 2020, they had an amazing time. Well, 2010 to 2019, they had an amazing time, gave all this cash away. But no one thought, oh, if there's a global pandemic, airlines are going to be halted. And now a lot of these airlines now needed a bailout. So an actuary would have said, I'm hoping, especially actuaries in the future, will say, hold on, there could be a global event that causes us to just ground all airlines. And it could maybe even be something else, like a meteor shower or a solar flare, or I don't know, maybe something coming out of space, or I don't know, whatever. Like I think there was, gosh, I remember when I was at university, there was that volcanic eruption over Iceland, and then the whole of Europe couldn't fly for a bit. Airlines should have been aware that, hey, there are events that could have caused them from not operating, and therefore they should hold a significant amount of cash so that they can continue to pay employees and continue to maintain and keep the airlines ready, so that when things clear up, they can go back into business. But they didn't do that. It became so much of, and, you know, oh, we've got to make the share price go up, 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 up. And, you know, too much cash is going to, you know, dilute returns. So let's basically get rid of it. And we see that, you know, they really did feel the pain. They had to ask government for bailout, and it just became another event of chaos. So to answer the question, actuaries are agents of order, and we're trying to fight chaos that might occur in the future. So what I like about that definition is it doesn't narrow an actuary into being, because some people love to say, making sense of the financial future. And I'm like, does it have to be financial? You know, if something's not financial, does that then disqualify it from being actuarial? And I would argue that that's not the case. Anything that can be a chaotic event especially in the future, is something that an actuary is equipped to deal with. So it is a very mythological way of answering the question, but hopefully, it drives home the point that we're agents of order, and we're addressing chaos in the future.
Thank you for that. I think that's the first time I've heard that kind of explanation. And I've also made my own what is an actuary explanation, and I would have never come close to this. I think it's more CP3 type of understandable to the ordinary man on the street. I think it becomes easier. It's more palatable this way, let me say. So thank you so much for that definition and the mythological analogy. That's really helpful. So I see you've already gone into some of the areas where actuaries work. So you've covered life insurance, general insurance, health, and finance and banking and risk as well. What are the other areas where actuaries work, and just what do they do in these areas?
So I mean, here in South Africa, we have 6 fellowships that you can go into. And it's a little bit different here because I think we're the pioneers of the banking fellowship. So
yes,
we're kind of the first to say actuaries can add a lot of value to banks, and therefore let's have a dedicated course for that. So banking is the latest one, but we also have life insurance, which is the first one, general insurance, health insurance, pensions, and finance. And maybe let me talk a little bit more about and then like I said, then there's the wider field. So that's where you can go out and do, like I said, there's a lot of different things you can get into. I remember, and if you're interested in that, this is where the enterprise risk management one is quite a nice subject to do because it prepares you for the wider fields. And we got a seminar he's known as the actuary in a hard hat, because he's into property development and engineering and all of those kind of things. Because you can imagine there is chaos, like if an earthquake was to occur, and this foundation shift on the building, what should be done? An actuary can kind of say, hey, this is our game plan if something like that was to occur. So there is the wider fields. It doesn't have its own fellowship yet. There is something else that you can get your fellowship in. It's known as the F100. And my friend who went to school with me, was just a year above me. He was one of those crazy kids who got like 100% for maths and that kind of stuff. He's the first person to get F100. And that is when you can write a thesis. So normally it's PhD level on anything. But as long as there's an actuarial element to it, you're eligible to get into the fellowship through this. So he did his on catastrophe bonds, which does have quite a bit of an overlap with, say, general insurance and finance. But like I said, let me chat a little bit more about finance because that's the one that I did. And so essentially the finance one, it's similar to the CFA level 3. It's similar, but we're slightly in different places on the value chain. So what would essentially happen, or to give like a little bit of the cycle, is most money, if not all money, comes from people. People have money. People put money aside. They can either put it into savings products or risk products. Risk products being life insurance and that kind of things. Saving products being like pensions and bank accounts and that. So essentially, the people give their small little amounts every month to these giant institutions. So these giant institutions are getting lots and lots of money every single month. Okay, got all this money. What they then do is they will then come to a financial actuary. Not always, because it's not a regulatory requirement. And I'll chat a little bit. Maybe mention that quickly. With insurance, you have a regulatory requirement for a life actuary to sign off that these reserves are enough. Or you have a life, and this is known as a statutory role. And that's why these actuaries sometimes get paid a little bit more, because the law of the land says you have to have an actuary sign off on this. Where with my role, it's not a statutory role. Anyone could basically do it. But the reason why they would want to get an actuary is because what we do is we study the structure of institutions. So we learn all about pension funds, we learn all about life insurance, learn all about banks. And what our essential strategy is when it comes to investing is matching liabilities. So we say, okay, all these people have given you money, you've got a liability to pay them back in the future. And like I said, it's going to be a chaotic event in the future if you're unable to pay them. So how should you invest that money now so that your liabilities aren't going to bite you, that you actually have set them aside? So what an actuary will do, we design the whole investment strategy to be around the liabilities of these institutions. And what we do is, it's normally as an advisory role. So we will advise the pension fund trustees, or we will advise the management of these life insurance companies and that. Once we give them our advice, sometimes they'll take us with, or they'll invite a whole bunch of CFA asset managers to come in, and it's called the beauty parade. They'll come in and say, oh, look at my fund, you know, I got 20% return last year, or, oh, I've got super low risk, or, oh, I won this award, you know, and I'm over exaggerating, but, you know, they come in and they're the guys with the big fancy watches, and super confident, you know, slick, and everything is just, you know, they'll maybe hand out little notebooks, and it's like a real, you know, like you feel like, ooh, like royalty. And they'll come and say, this is their funds, this is how they manage money. An actuary will then sometimes interview them or interrogate them, you know, say, when does your strategy work? Under what market conditions? Oh, under these conditions, but the market's currently looking like that. Okay, next. Okay, talk to me about your team. And then somebody might say, you know, this is our huge team, all of that. And an actuary might say, we actually want a smaller team, because then those people are more hungry. If you're too big, too much admin, you know, next. And we kind of go through and we pick a manager that suits this institution. And it's a big decision, because we're going to give them like billions and billions of rands. So you want to make sure that you do a thorough check. And then we will also assist with the monitoring. So we'll make sure, because what sometimes happens is a manager might say, oh, we're a passive investor. So you give them all your money, like, great, that's exactly what we want, low fees, yay, great. And then the following year comes, and their returns are very different to, let's say, that of the other passive funds. And let's say it goes up. Yeah, let's say it goes up. So like, it could even be a red flag if you get too much money back from them. And if you say, wait, what happened? They say, no. Because of COVID, we decided to take a more active approach, and look how much more money we have got for you. I would then fire that manager on the spot, which is crazy. You're firing someone for giving you more money.
Giving you more money.
And the reason why we would fire them on the spot is because they took part of something known as style drift. They drifted from what they said they were going to do. And this was very, very bad for us, because now our liabilities were no longer matched. And yes, they might have got us a higher return, but they exposed us to ruin. You know, there was, let's say, if they made the wrong decision and the thing went down, then we wouldn't be able to pay our liabilities. Then there's a lot of problems. So it's a weird thing, but we would fire that person if the returns were too high, because it means they took excessive risk that we hadn't agreed on beforehand. So this is what your financial actuary does. It's more about evaluating these asset managers, monitoring these asset managers, and just making sure that they do what they're saying they're going to do. Because like I said, you are handing them billions and billions of, not necessarily an institution's money, because as an actuary, you realize this money belongs to the people, you know, and it's, and you've got an ethical obligation to them to make sure that they, you know, don't get ripped off. Because you can imagine, this is the life savings of a lot of these people. So you don't want an asset manager gambling with it, because that's what a lot of sometimes some of these asset managers do, is because they take a 20% performance fee. It's in their incentive to roll the dice, because if they win, they get an extra 20% fee. If they lose, it's not their money, you know. Okay, they might lose a client, but there's no penalty for them. So that's why you want to be, as an actuary, you're kind of like this cynical, unlikable, you know, person who's interrogating these asset managers. And it's very important that you try and make sure that you know more than them, so that, you know, when they come with their confidence and their, you know, bravado, like, look at me, you can ask the questions that can, you know, if they don't know their stuff, you can pop their bubble and make sure that you get an asset manager who is going to be more strict with the money of the institution. So essentially that's what your your financial actuary is doing, investment strategy, portfolio construction, but a lot of your asset manager interaction.
Okay, that's very informative. And I've had the privilege of sitting through one of these beauty parades. And as you rightly put it, they're very convincing, they're so polished, their speech is flawless. It doesn't matter who's presenting, they all sound like they're the same person. This person who just belongs on TV, not, making these presentations. Yeah. So I also watched your video, the 8 types of actuaries that I think you released it quite a few years ago, but I watched it recently. And from that one, I also picked the gaming actuary, the consulting actuary, your audit actuaries, and what else did I leave out? I think anyone who's interested in knowing all the 8 types that you described can follow the link in the description box. But for now, can you just go into the gaming actuary? Because I'm sure when I said gaming, everyone thought the way I used to, like PS4. Oh my gosh, PS5. Yes, we're getting into it. Actuaries are in there. I want to be in that. Can you just explain what a gaming actuary is?
No, definitely. And I mean, it's actually been, I've just done a project now that's revolved a little bit around a game. So I'll even mention that. It's weird. It's like, it's actuarial science and it's a game and it's on the blockchain. We've just done this little hackathon. But to take a few steps back, the gaming actually, yes, those early videos of mine are very, very cringy. You can see my voice is a lot more high pitched and I'm like, woo. Which I guess I actually still am like that. But yes, with the gaming actually, I actually went for an interview. It was a gaming position. When I got there, they did inform me that gaming meant gambling. And it was, well, you can imagine, like coming back to our definition, an actuary addresses chaos in the future. What do casinos do? They play games and they can't give it so that nobody ever wins, because then no one will ever come back. But you can't have it that too many people are winning, too often. And again, I think that a casino is actually very similar to an insurance company. The big difference is that maybe the duration, instead of being long-term like an insurance company, it's more short-term, very short-term. It's like almost instant. You put your bet down, you roll the dice, and you either get your payout or not. So a casino will also need reserving. They will need to have an actuary calculate how much money do we need to set aside in cash so that we can pay out winnings this evening. And what should the ratio be that's in the house's favor? Like I say, too greedy and you're going to scare the players away. Too generous, and yes, you might make still in the long term, but there might be nights where you literally run out of cash. And also, casinos you don't want to hold too much cash, because then you become a target for the Ocean 11 heisters. They're going to come in, Brad Pitt and George Clooney are going to come in and rob your casino. So you've got to then factor in the security risk. And that's one thing that actuaries kind of pride themselves on is this holistic approach. So we're not just, like I say, we're not just looking at the financial risk of, oh, someone might win too many games. We also want to think, what happens if you get robbed? What happens if there's a flood? Or what happens if rats get into the safe and eat it? We want to start thinking out of the box a little bit creatively on all the horrible things that could happen to a company. Like I say, it's very good to develop a cynical mindset when doing actuarial consulting and stuff. But so an actuary can assist quite a lot in gaming. I mean, I remember I went to UCT and a friend, well, he became a friend, but he was presenting his honors project on being able to predict the soccer results just soccer results of the English Premier League. And essentially what he did is he set up, each team had 2 Poisson parameters. One was their rate of scoring goals, one was their rate of conceding goals. And when 2 teams played against each other, their attacking one and this one's defending one were combined. And then likewise like that. So you had 2 random variables that were being generated on how many goals each team was scoring based on the attack and defense. And then you could calculate who won or lost. And this was based on the previous year's results. And his work was actually incredibly accurate. And he showed that if you were to take various gambling strategies, you could actually make a little bit of money in the long run on this thing. Of course, the model doesn't take into the fact, doesn't factor in if Cristiano Ronaldo suddenly leaves your team and now you've lost your key person. So, these models aren't flawless. But yeah, it was incredible to see how, and with soccer, certain teams stay at the top of the log for much longer than teams at the bottom. There is a little bit of stability there. But so Actuaries can assist in pure casinos. We can assist in sport betting. But you're talking about PlayStation 4, PlayStation 5. I think it's something that Actuaries are going to get into. And the reason why I say that is because you look at some of these computer games, okay? There is a degree of randomness. So when you have, like, let's say a boss fight, or even the way the bad guys walk around, they want to follow a random walk to just give them more of a natural feeling, so you don't want them just to walk up and down in the same pattern. You want them to maybe go a little bit to the left, a little bit to the right, not too much that they then bump into something else or block your way, but there is a little bit of, stochastic processing that is going into these game designs, and Actuaries can come in and assist with that. Of course, and this is sometimes like a little bit of a problem with Actuaries maybe going too much into the wider fields, is sometimes the gaming companies can't afford us, because you can imagine there will be some people who have just studied stochastic process, who've just studied mathematical statistics, and they're a better fit than, because think, we're not bringing in any of our institutional knowledge into the gaming environment. Maybe if a game has got a bank account or insurance, but that's stretching a bit. So yes, Actuaries can get into gaming, but normally we don't, because, we come in and let's say we were charging, $200 an hour. This guy's done maybe just mathematical statistics and who's obsessed with games is charging $50 an hour. And he's probably at the same level as us when it comes to doing that job. So as an actuary, you can get into gaming, but you then have to say, okay, I'm going to take a much, like a big pay cut. And I think then you can then get into it. So one of the games that, and then, so we can work for gaming companies. And then what I love to do is design games. So one of the things that I've been just interested in has been this whole Bitcoin blockchain kind of thing. I'm not too much on the hype train of, like, I don't really hold any Bitcoin now. I've missed this latest wave. But, and I kind of think DeFi and all the things financial things that they are building on the blockchain, I think they're all critically flawed, because there's such high transaction costs that no one really likes to talk about, that you only really come across when you start using it. But that all said and done, for this past 3 weeks, we've entered a hackathon where we've created a game. And the game is simply, you water a tree, and if you don't forget to water the tree, you get a share of the fruit. Of course, watering the tree means making a payment, and harvesting the fruit means receiving a payment. And it's built around this idea of lapse risk. So lapse is when somebody forgets to pay. So if you forget to water the tree, the community tree, you're kicked out of the garden. It's like tough luck, So you might be like, but I've made 5 payments already. Sorry, cheers. The people who don't forget any payments, those payments that have been made from the other people, all come into one big fund and then get divided amongst those who didn't. So you can imagine, if 100 people start and only 50 people end, you're looking at almost double your money that you put in, because it's now, the pool has shrunk and the fund size has got larger. So that was something that we built on. And where we made it a little bit more interesting, or I guess the game theory came in, is, what should those parameters be? Should it be, 100 Rand a week? Should it be 1,000 Rand a month? What should be the payment frequency, the payment duration, all these things. And we thought, and this is, I guess, just my go-to, whenever you don't know something, is either gamify it or try to get a machine learning algorithm to optimize it. So what we decided to do, just because we didn't have enough time to get an AI involved, is we thought, let's create a third, or like another player, called the planter, who then determines what these parameters are. And then depending on how many people lapse, that person might get a bonus, or they might lose according to some of the game rules. And this was, it was quite nice, because we had this problem of, what should we set these parameters to be? And now we can be like, well, let's gamify it. And you can think of, imagine an insurance company that says, we don't know what the excess should be. We don't know what the exclusions should be. Let's maybe gamify it. Let's maybe ask a third person or people to choose what they want it to be and see, what could happen. Is it too complicated for the market? Is it like, oh gosh, just tell me my premium and I want to pay it? Or maybe, you've got some people out there who are like, hey, hold on, I can customize my insurance. And I think as insurance systems get a lot better, they're going to be able to handle this customization. And that's maybe something that I would add to the types of actuaries that we might see coming up. And that is a systems actuary. Okay. So one of the big risks that it's coming. No one likes to talk about it, but there's a big wave of chaos that is coming in the future. And that is, it's known as legacy risk. So it's the fact that your big insurance companies have outdated software. A lot of them have got software from the 80s. Okay. Now, in computers, like a calculator from the 80s can't really do much. A computer from the 80s
That's true.
can't really do much. But these insurance companies have gotten so big and so large that either they can't afford it or it will take too long for them to migrate onto a new modern system. And so what they do is they just postpone. So they've been postponing updates for 40 years.
Years on end.
And that's why these little upcoming insurance companies, like these little startups, yes, they might not have, the mass and the weight and the size of the big players, but they're a lot more flexible. They're a lot more nimble. They've got all this cool technology. And that's why you sometimes see, maybe I'm being a little bit cynical about the industry here, but an insurance company, a big one, will be like, okay, let's buy that technology for 10 million and then just park it because it's a threat. It's a threat. So rather just buy it and park it, or slowly use it for like maybe, testing purposes and see if we can learn a little bit from it. But it's almost like, let's squash any newcomers with a lot of money. Before, and think that the little guy, if you offered me 10 million Rand for a little application that I made, I'll be like, okay, holiday for a year or two. So this is this interesting thing that, and there's been stories of pension funds that have tried to move to a new system. They don't do the migration properly. They lost all of the data, and now they don't know who has sent money to the pension fund and who the pension fund owes. So suddenly this pension fund is sitting with tens of billions of rands and they don't know who it belongs to.
Money it is, yeah.
Now you can imagine, we're speaking about events of chaos.
Yeah.
That is the chaotic event to occur when there's 10 billion Rand and you don't know who it belongs to. You can imagine all the emails of people saying, I owe this much, you owe this, and now they have to fact check and all. It's a mess. So I definitely see actuaries getting involved in systems. Already I would almost say it's not even a type of actuaries, just saying that all actuaries need to embrace is programming. So it's kind of like, actuaries are good at maths. In 5 years' time, we're going to be saying, oh, you're an actuary. Oh, you're good at data science. Oh, you're good at programming. I think actuaries need not necessarily the programming like a developer. I don't necessarily see us creating applications, but more using programming languages to analyze data a lot quicker. And that's also something about programming. People, we group it under one thing. We just like, oh, you're a programmer, not realizing that there are different ways to use computer languages. Even as an actuary, like I say, there's probably two main branches: those who will be analyzing data and using these statistical methods to go through and compute vast amounts of information in a short period of time. And then there's also going to be those who are going to be looking at maybe the architecture of a system and saying, okay, can this be updated? Because this is one thing that we mustn't make this mistake again. We mustn't make it so that our system can't be updated in the future. And I worked at a development company that was building systems for insurance companies. And they had the perfect software, like it was really, really awesome. But there were still so many operational complexities. Like I saw it, like I was at the company for 14 months and there was one client that was trying to get onto the system because they were a big legacy company, trying to get onto our awesome system. by the time I left 14 months later, they were still trying to get onto our awesome system. So you can imagine, and I mean, that was just causing stress. Deadlines were being missed. It, you know, became quite an intense work environment. But this is definitely a problem that companies need to actually say, hey, legacy risk is a thing. We can't just keep kicking this down the road like all our predecessors have. So, and I know the Actuarial Society, I mean, I was part of one of the teams that was like writing, we were thinking of coming up with a textbook or something like that. It did start to lose a little bit of momentum because, like I say, it's not a threat that is staring at us right now. Like you can imagine, COVID is now in everybody's face. Everybody's just caring about COVID, the danger that has occurred. But we need to say, hey, hold on. There might be, you know, a danger right now, but there's going to be more dangers in the future. And as an actuary, you need to step back and actually tell your team, say, hey, yes, COVID important, COVID bad, but there's all these other things that are going to come up. And when they say, no, we'll talk about that later, we're like, we talk about it today. You know, we need to get this game plan in. So there are a lot of things that actuaries can branch out into. Some of the fun ones, unfortunately, that we can do will probably be undercut by other people who also want to do, because you can imagine game design. That is fun. Everyone, like I do it not for money. I do it as a hobby. You know, so it's difficult to make a career out of it. But it is something that you can tinker with, you can have fun with, and that's the best thing for an actuary, is to keep your eyes open, look at technology, and not run away from it and say, oh no, I'm happy with my Excel. I've got Excel. I know all the shortcuts. I'm good. It's like, learn. I mean, there's a new language coming out called, well, it's already come out for a few years now, called Julia. We need to be checking that out, you know. So yes, R, yes, Python, but now there's also like another one, Julia. There might be another one that comes out a few years from now. It's good to stay, on top of
ahead
it.
of
And
all
then,
of that.
And then, I think if you have that toolkit and those skills, then an actuary can theoretically, go into a whole bunch of wider fields, because like I say, there is always going to be chaos in the future.
Yeah. Wow, this talk has been very eye-opening. Thank you so much, Michael, for agreeing to sit down and have this chat with me. All the different aspects that you've touched on, I think will be very useful to someone starting their actuarial career, someone who's just curious about the profession in general as well. And I really appreciate your time. So where can people find you on social media?
Okay, cool. So, I mean, my main one is MJ, the Fellow Actuary, which is on YouTube. I think there's over 400 videos now. So there's a lot of videos out there. Like I said, the early ones are a little bit cringe. I've got a Facebook group. It's a private group, but we tend to welcome most of the people that click to join it. It's called the Actuarial Community, and it's like a long name. It's like tutorials, news, exam, blah blah. It's just like a long name, but the Actuarial Community on Facebook. That's up to like 6,000 members. LinkedIn, I'm happy to accept anyone on LinkedIn. I think that's how we chatted and we got in contact. So LinkedIn, just type in Michael Jordan Actuary, not Michael Jordan basketball player, and then you should find me. And then, I mean, I'm on Twitter and Instagram, but I use Instagram more for cars and racing, and I use Twitter more for art and that kind of stuff. So I guess the last one to maybe check out is my Udemy library. So I've just recently been accepted into Udemy Business, which is exciting because apparently only 3% of creators get allowed into this program. And that means that if you're working for a big company and they have a Udemy agreement, you can actually go in and watch all of my videos at your company's expense. So that's also something that you can check out. And I've got, I must actually do a proper count, but I've got a lot of hours of videos on Udemy. In fact, of the past year or two, majority of my videos have been going onto Udemy. So if you want more like dedicated towards the exams, definitely go check those out. The YouTube, the videos are coming out a little bit more fun and casual stuff like that.
Okay, so we'll leave your links in the description box. Thank you so much for chatting with us.
Absolute pleasure.